Hello, how are we doing, bro?
I'm doing alright. I'm really sorry for interrupting you twice.
It's fine, don't worry about
Sorry,
it.
man.
Go on.
I just wanted to know because, sorry, I had a nap on the grass.
Yeah?
Yeah, for a
Okay,
little
no worries. So what did you want to talk about, bro? Or what did you want to ask?
about Deuteronomy 21:10-14.
All right, hold on then.
Can I record this? Like, just
Yes, if you want.
Sure.
Oh, no, I'm all right, thank you. That's very kind of you. I'm going to have a conversation with him, and then afterwards you.
I really appreciate it.
Right, go on.
I'm really struggling with this verse. I know.
Can I ask you why you're struggling with it? Who put the argument in your head?
Atheist.
Right. So Deuteronomy what? 21.
21:10-14.
21, 10 to 14. Okay, go on. When you go out to battle against your enemies and the Lord your God delivers them into your hands and you take them away captive and see among the captives a beautiful woman and have a desire for her and would take her as a wife for yourself, then you shall bring her home to your house and she shall shave her head and trim her nails. She shall also remove the clothes from her captivity and shall remain in your house and mourn her father and mother a full month. And after that you may go into her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. It shall be, if you are not pleased with her, then you shall let her go wherever she wishes, but you shall certainly not sell her for money. You shall not mistreat her, because you have humbled her. Go on.
Okay, so the reason, first of all, do you believe in an absolute morality, a objective morality, and a subjective morality? Or do you believe just objective and subjective?
Okay, so I think it depends on the category that we're working in. So epistemologically, ultimately, everything ends up being to some degree subjective because the individual has to make a choice about what they accept or reject. But in terms of moral values, I believe in absolute moral values.
You see, the question I'm getting, or I'm formulating by myself, is that why would God command this through Moses? He never commanded it, but he kind of put limits on it.
Yeah.
And I know this was the Bronze Age, and this is what they had to do in order to survive.
Yeah. So it's not just in order what they would. So let me deal with that point exactly. It's not just in order what they would have to do to survive, because clearly you don't have to do this to survive. It's about how much worse they would be if God didn't put limits on their actions. So, for instance, we know as Christians, I guess you're a Christian.
Yeah, I'm Christian.
We know as Christians that divorce is something that is profoundly sinful, and that Christ forbids a divorce except in the case of adultery, right? But he says, because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses was instructed that you should write a divorce certificate. So in other words, Jesus is saying that the stubbornness and brutality of the Israelites was such they would do sin and could not be convinced to do otherwise. So for instance, Jesus quotes the Old Testament law about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But then he goes on to say, but I say to you, he who strikes you on your right cheek, turn to him your left. So in other words, the law was limiting sin. It was limiting what they would do. In other words, given where they were at this moment, this is the best behavior that they could achieve. But the reality is that even these limits they couldn't keep to. Even these restrictions they couldn't keep to. And so the law was demonstrating for future generations that sin is operating inside of humanity.
And if you don't mind me saying so, this is how you don't behave. This is how you mustn't behave as a human being. That's what it's telling you.
Well, it's so in the Old Testament context, it's putting restrictions on the Israelites about what they do. Now, the thing is, people Atheists, and this is what you as a Christian must do, you must affirm and assert with confidence the idea of the new covenant. Don't allow the atheist to distort the discussion by saying, oh well, but God permitted it in the past. Because the reality as Christians is we genuinely believe in the new covenant. We're not out on the street saying everyone follow Moses, we're out on the street saying everyone follow Jesus. And Jesus has said that because of the stubbornness of the hearts of Israel, God permitted them to do things because if he didn't limit them in some way, they would do far worse.
Okay, so you believe in the idea that God was changing them over time and then...
Yes.
Okay.
He was tutoring them. And he was tutoring them and he was preparing them for the new covenant. The end journey was always the new covenant. But the thing is, these laws in their historical context are still superior to anything around. Like, surrounding civilizations didn't even give these kinds of equalities or dignities to women that were captured.
So
and it says to take them as a wife,
yeah,
not as a sex slave.
But the thing is, right? Like,
yeah.
I know I shouldn't be really looking forward to it, but like the questions I've been getting, or the questions I've been asking by myself,
yeah,
is that if this was forced marriage, or like if she wasn't consenting, right?
Yeah.
Was God commanding? Was God commanding an absolute morality or an objective morality based on society?
Well, let me ask you this question: Is a marriage consensual?
Yes.
Is anything here? What is the giveaway that this is a marriage? You shall bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head and trim her nails. She shall also remove her clothes of her captivity, and shall remain in your house and mourn her father and mother. So she's given time to mourn, right? So she's given time to mourn for a full month, and after that you may go into her and be her husband. So if the man is the husband, what's the wife?
The wife.
Yeah, sorry. No. If the man is the husband, what is the woman?
The wife.
Right. And is marriage consensual or forced?
But was it like that at the time?
Well, this is what it's saying. It's saying that you shall be her husband. So it's not talking about sex slaves here. It's talking about you've taken a woman captive, right? You've taken her captive. She's now in your house. You give her time to mourn. You give her time to mourn the fact that she's lost her family, that she's lost a tribe. And then, obviously, if she consents, you become her husband. There's no sex slavery here. It's all in the word husband. So don't let the atheist distort the scripture, and don't allow the atheist to distort how you think about scripture. Now, are the times of the Bible more brutal than ours? Absolutely. Are you going to find things in the Bible that jar with our sensibilities today? Absolutely. But the reason why they're going to jar with you at all is because you've been raised a Christian, and Christianity has informed your moral sentiments, and that's why you find that there are things in the Old Covenant that jar with you. Does that make sense?
Yes, Bob.
Yeah?
One more question.
Yeah, go on.
I've heard you say the Israelites were brutalized people and they themselves were brutal.
Yes.
Right? How were they brutal? I know they were brutal, but how were they brutalized?
They were slaves for 400 years in Egypt.
But does that mean their descendants were brutalized?
Of course. It's like what happened to the Afro-Caribbeans in America. They were taken as slaves, they were brutalized, and then they were let free. Right? But the thing is, they had instilled habits and customs from the time of slavery that still permeate their community. So, for instance, there is a problem of absentee fathers amongst the Afro-Caribbean community. That is something that they developed culturally because of the brutality of slavery, because you would marry, you'd have children, and then maybe the man would be resold. And then he'd have another wife, and he'd have children with someone else. And that habit that cultural habit was formed because of slavery, the brutality of slavery. So yes, if you're brutalized, you become brutal.
Can I also say that the Israelites were brutalized based on their surroundings, like the people surrounding?
Yeah, it was a brutal world, bro. It was a brutal world that they lived in. Another example to the same would be Palestine, or children that were raised during the short time that ISIS dominated. These children were raised to feel violent and to think violent thoughts. So in one generation, you had children raised in a violent world by violent people who thought violently. So brutalization only takes one generation. But they had it for 400 years in Egypt. But the real world, the truth is that they were just living in a brutal world. Everyone was brutal back those days.
So can I say that their parents instilled values in them based on what they experienced, and their children put the same thing on their descendants,
and so on and so forth. But then those values God restrains through His law. So God uses the law to hold back the evil that was in their heart. And that's what God is doing. But their heart is so evil and so stubborn that without that law they would do far worse. And God realizes, like a good teacher, He realizes what His students can accept and not accept. And so He leads them forward to the new covenant through the prophets. You know, because Moses passes a law that says sacrifices. Yes, of course. Yeah, absolutely. How good? Like, your English is really good, so I'm going to give you a King James.
I don't know about that.
Right?
I did get a star in my.
Yeah. Every now and then, the English of the King James is a bit awkward, so just look up in the dictionary or thesaurus. Yeah? We'll talk again. I just need to finish this conversation.
I just want to ask you a question on Christianity.
Can I just finish this conversation?
No, can I ask you a question on Christianity?
Yes, definitely.
No.
Let me finish this conversation
That's
with him.
all right.
Yes, definitely.
No, I'm only going to learn from you. But there was
Yes.
a question I want to ask about
Absolutely, I will. But I just want to finish this conversation
You've
with
been
you.
saying that a long time, haven't you?
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, bro.
No, carry on.
I can't talk to everybody at the same time. Yeah. Peace with you, sister. God bless you.
God bless you.
Anyway, here, let me give you a card. Anyway, so the fact of the matter is that, like a good student, he's leading them forward. So Moses establishes a covenant that says sacrifice animals and burnt offerings. And then the prophets later say, the sacrifice that I want from you is a broken and contrite heart, not animal sacrifices and burnt offerings. So God is leading them forward from their brutal beginnings to the establishment of the new covenant, which is based on love. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah?
Okay. Okay, not one more, but
Go on.
their wife, right? They were told to send them away if they don't. Like, what is that? Is that
Wherever they want to go.
But like,
So she said to her, I want to go back to the village of my people, which is maybe one that's not been conquered by Israel. Then then they have to be taken and released back to her people.
okay,
Now think about this, right? Because the scripture actually says, if she displeases you, right?
yeah.
Doesn't define what displeasing is, to be fair, but the scripture says, right? If you are not pleased with her, then you shall let her go wherever she wishes. So it's giving the woman a choice.
But was it her choice to be divorced?
Divorced?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the vague point, the bit that's not clear, is if she displeases you. So it's not clear what it means by displeases you, but one would assume that someone who's resentful and doesn't want to be there and hates being there is going to end up displeasing the husband.
Oh, okay.
So I would assume that if she doesn't want to be married, she would end up displeasing her husband, and therefore the husband would have to let her go, in other words, divorce, wherever she wants to go. And she gets to choose where she goes. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Now, please, it says let her go. Let her go wherever she wants. And it says that you can't, so she's not a slave, look, wherever she wishes, but you shall certainly not sell her for money. So she's not a slave. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
She's not a slave. You shall not mistreat her. So she's not a slave. So atheists are distorting the argument, and brother, you're allowing their arguments to influence your thinking. But you've done exactly the right thing. You've come and spoke to an elder Christian, you've come and sought knowledge. So I want to say, well done, you. And you're an example of what young Christians should be doing. What's your name?
My name, her name or real name?
A fake name for Speaker's Corner.
ZJ.
ZJ. Right, everybody be more, or if you're a Christian youth, be more like ZJ. Yeah? Don't listen to the lies of the enemies of the church. Go and speak to knowledgeable Christian apologists and seek knowledge. Well done, ZJ. All right, God bless.